Today on the BWI Daily Edition, we're closing our look at Penn State and Purdue with a stock up, stock down of the Penn State defensive players and their performance on Thursday night. We've watched the film. It's over at bluewhiteillustrated.com, a film review and my notes. But today, we're going to give you the players that stood out both good and bad for the Nittany Lions on the BWI Daily Edition. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr. Happy Labor Day. Now, there's been a whole bunch of stuff that has happened over the last couple of days since Penn State football played Purdue. Apparently, we're expanding the college football playoff, amongst other things. We're going to get to some of that stuff eventually here on the show. But our main focus, as always, is the Nittany Lions and getting you up to speed with what happened during the game, give you a little bit of deeper dive. That's what I do. That's what I'm comfortable with. So we're giving you that. Friday, we had the offense, the players who had stock up, stock down. Check that out. And, of course, today on the show, we're going to wrap that up looking at the defensive side of the ball. I mentioned in the introduction, bluewhiteillustrated.com. Sign up for $1. Get 12 months of insider access. That can give you all the information, the deep dive on the film review. And I went real deep when it comes to the Penn State defense because Manny Diaz and his scheme, it's all brand new. So there's a lot of ground to cover. We're not going to cover everything because that's impossible. I would be here for a month showing you everything. So we're going to go piece by piece throughout the season. But that's at bluewhiteillustrated.com. Last thing before we get into the stock up and stock down players, I need you to help me out here. We set a goal after the live show, 500 likes for the video. We got to 1,000. Now, this is not directly after one of the craziest games for an opener that Penn State has had to a season since, well, honestly, the last two have been nuts. But we can absolutely get to 500 for this video. So give this video 500 likes, help grow the channel. That's you putting in some work here for the BWI Daily, which I super appreciate. And it's free. Just hit the like button. And if you sign up for the Blue White Illustrated on YouTube, it's all costing you exactly $1. Okay, enough jibber jabber. Let's get to the show. Stock up players on defense. Really interesting performance. A lot of highs, a lot of lows, but Joey Porter Jr. and Chop Robinson separated themselves as the clear-cut best players on the field for Penn State football on Thursday. PJ Mustipher, Jonathan Sutherland, Keaton Ellis, a little more low profile in their stock up, but we're going to get to those guys here on the show as well. And I want to start there in the middle because PJ Mustipher, it's not necessarily that he was a hugely impactful player, but it's the fact that he was out there for the number of snaps that he was, and he looked pretty good. Now, there's some caveats here. 48 total snaps. It's about half the snaps in the game. That's good coming off that injury that he sustained last year, that ACL. He was good in run defense. He was looked solid, looked like he wasn't giving up ground, didn't look like he had any structural weaknesses, didn't look like a tower that only had supports on one side, but only 12 defensive run snaps, and it's Purdue's defensive line. A good test out of the gate, right? But still not going to be the hardest test he faces this year. So Penn State gets out of that with PJ Mustipher playing well when he was asked to do the things he was asked to do. One pass rushing pressure. I've never really looked at PJ as a pass rushing specialist as a defensive tackle. He's really developed into that nose tackle, one tech sort of player. But he flashed a little bit. Penn State's defense loves to stunt. They love to twist. They love to get people and change gaps. And when he did that a couple of times, he was able to get to the quarterback or at least get on the edge of a guard and push the pocket. Those are all really good things. But overall, in totality, a lot of empty rushes there. But we're not really looking at him to provide that stuff. And more on that in just a little bit. But PJ Mustipher coming up with some big plays for Penn State in an understated sense. Also understated, a little bit at least, is Keaton Ellis. Keaton Ellis played a good game from the secondary position. He was in and out. Penn State played up to 4 safeties at one point, but he was making breaks on the ball. He was jumping routes for the Nittany Lions. All that's very good. And getting that so early in the season from a multitude of players in the secondary, especially when it wasn't a very clean game overall from all of the Nittany Lions. Sutherland played well. That is a really good sign for the Nittany Lions that They have depth and dependability like we expected. He was who we thought he was. That's really what it was, is he didn't make a lot of mental mistakes. I don't think he really made any. And if you check out the film review over at Blue White Illustrated, a lot of this is coming out of that. Late in the game, once Penn State realized Aiden O'Connell's never holding onto the football, they're not going to do that this game. The Penn State secondary started jumping on routes. They started attacking underneath coverage, and Ellis got his hands on a couple of footballs. Didn't come up with an interception, but good play from him. Another guy, and here is a big one, Jonathan Sutherland. Jonathan Sutherland was good in run defense. He had some up and down plays in pass coverage, but overall, for what people were expecting of him, Jonathan Sutherland played well on Thursday night. Again, not a whole lot of running from Purdue, but when they were able to bounce plays and when they were able to get Penn State in a couple of bad situations, Sutherland wasn't the primary cause of concern or problem in those situations. A couple of times, but nothing beyond the standard for a linebacker playing in the flat who has to defend against the RPO. There wasn't anything beyond that. So solid in run defense, played his coverage as well. I think he's settling into that position. But it's not going to be just Sutherland there. Dom DeLuca had some snaps there and played well. They obviously went to 4 safety looks, 2 slot corners. They're much more diverse than Penn State has been over the last couple of years, where it's very much been 3 linebackers, then you bring on a nickel corner. Now it's much more mix and match, especially, again, against Purdue, when you have so many 4 receiver sets, 3 receiver sets, and they're spreading the field out. So good work for Jonathan Sutherland. There's more to learn. And we're going to see Penn State, I believe, use much more in the sub-package variety in the coming weeks and other times against other opponents. This defense, I do really believe, is going to do a lot of different various and varying things for the season because they have so many players they can put in different positions. Now, number 2 on our list, and this is a little bit more linear than before, than last week, is Chop Robinson. Chop Robinson played very well during his debut, was a pass rushing problem for the Nittany Lions, and was able to get to the quarterback several times, especially in that obvious final play of the game where he's able to get a hit on the quarterback and force Aiden O'Connell to give up the game just so he didn't take a sack. But it wasn't just that. There were several other plays where either indirectly or directly, Robinson was causing pressure on O'Connell that either forced the throw for an incompletion or hurried the throw and made it, off target where it was a harder catch for the receiver. So that pressure that Penn State was giving O'Connell, even when it wasn't getting there, was affecting him. It affected the game plan. And it's surprising because Penn State had very little proven on the edge coming into the game, but Manny Diaz's reputation, there was enough to back that up, especially late in the game as O'Connell had to hold on to the football more and more and getting to some deeper drops and some bigger decisions. Chop Robinson was able to put some pressure on the quarterback, and Penn State desperately needs one of those guys on the defensive line to step up and be the leader. And right now, it looks like he's going to be that guy. There's still plenty of time for Adisa Isaac and Dani Dennis-Sutton to get into that rotation. But as of now, Chop Robinson looks like the real deal coming out of the gate. His explosiveness we saw on film from high school is still there. He's gotten stronger, I think, through contact. That was another thing that was a separator amongst him and the other Penn State defensive linemen, was when you're able to get on the edge of a lineman, when you're not coming straight down the middle, either a bull rush or just a bad rush, he was creating problems consistently for the blockers where they couldn't get a clean hand on him. And when they did, or even when they came into contact, he had the strength to keep his position and keep his momentum going forward. Those are great signs for a guy who's a little bit undersized for the position. As he grows into it, or as Penn State decides to use him in different ways, I think his versatility is going to stand out, and his pass rushing prowess, these are things that are going to improve throughout the season. I don't think this is the high watermark based on what I've seen and his abilities. Next up, and this is our number 1 player, Joey Porter Jr., always going to be polarizing. This is always going to be a polarizing conversation. He allowed 66 yards, which led the team, but he was targeted 14 times, which was by far the most on the team. He allowed as many receptions as he got pass breakups. That's insane. That is a crazy amount of getting your hands on the football. PFF, they said on a tweet, that ties the record for the most single pass breakups in one game since 2014. That is a gaudy amount of getting your hand on the football. Struggled a little bit early in single coverage. I think everyone's aware of that. But as the game went on, again, as Penn State realized, they're not running any double moves. They're just quick game, go routes, very simple things so they can get open. Maybe a couple ins and a couple dig routes to get some yardage in critical situations. They were not holding onto the football. Joey Porter Jr. basically started running routes for the receiver. There was one play in particular at the beginning of the game where his near interception, where that's entirely on him. He was in a different coverage, and he read what the quarterback was doing, broke off his assignment, and nearly got a pick six. Now, bad luck and some bad ball skills, maybe don't catch it with your face, made it so that was a reception. But from a mental processing standpoint and a reaction standpoint, those are the important things that stay consistent. It's not an issue of he can't do it. He's showing he can do it. Man coverage, locking down receivers. I still think in zone and especially off zone, he's got some work to do. But in man coverage, his giant long arms are all showing up. And I understand that the pass interference calls are still there. But I could do an entire separate video on that particular play and how, because it's a back shoulder throw, it looks worse than it is, but you can always call that if you want to. And with Joey Porter Jr., very physical, you're going to call it because that's what we're doing now. Don't have a problem with it either way, but I don't think it's as egregious as this consistent narrative about him persists. Okay. So we've gone through the stock up players. Now let's get to the stock down players. But before we do that, I want to tell you about a new sponsor of the show. That is Rogue Shop, a husband and wife outfit. Mr. Rogue and his wife Shar craft cannabis farmers who specialize in small batch sustainable plant medicine, holistic type of small business. They farm it themselves. They grow it all themselves. They do everything by hand. If you order something from Rogue Shop, I wish I had it with me. I don't have it right here, but Shar sends a note with instructions if you're new. I was new when I was trying out their products. I've never had any of this, never done any of this stuff before, and they are super helpful. They gave me a call and talked me through all of the products on the website to explain what they do, what's in them, and what the effects are going to be. And this is not just about, they do have Delta 9 products, they have Delta 8 products. They're all lab tested, they're lab quality. But it's not just about that. Their real goal is holistic healing. It is about making your life better if you suffer from stress, insomnia, or pain. And I'll tell you, staying up till 2 a.m. watching film, breaking all this down to talk to you about it, I love doing all these things, but I have not slept in 3 days. So when my sleep cycle comes, I want to be able to fall asleep and stay asleep. And that's what they hooked me up with. They're Delta 9 gummies. Take them right before bed. Sleep throughout the night. If you have pain, if you're chronically sitting and staring at screens and you have stress or anxiety, some of these things will help alleviate those problems and change your life. That's what they're all about. Richard is a former military member. He's experienced those sort of things in his own life personally, and he wants to help with all that stuff. So check out rogueshop.com, and you can use the promo code. It fits better when there's two of us here on the show, but right here on my forehead, rogueshop.com, promo code BWI. So check out rogueshop.com, promo code BWI. Okay, so let's get to the stock down players, and I hate doing this so much. This hurts me. And we have Curtis Jacobs at the top of our list. Dani Dennis-Sutton, Hakeem Beamon, and I'm cheating here. For 4 and 5, we're putting the Mike linebackers together. Part of this list with the offensive players is about your expectation of a player coming into the game as much as it is how they performed individually. And Dani Dennis-Sutton probably should be lower on this list as I'm looking at it. But I assume most people were not expecting a lot of the middle linebackers, but there were a lot of people expecting a lot of Dani Dennis-Sutton. And I'm not even saying there's anything wrong with the way Dani played in the game. We'll get to the numbers right now because they weren't really all that illuminating. because he was only on the field for 9 snaps, 7 pass rushes, 0 pressures. So when he was on the field, there was not a lot of impact, but he was on the field for 9 snaps. How are you supposed to do much of anything in those situations? So a quiet first game for Dani. And that's okay because Penn State was able to get pressure and simulate pressure, most importantly, with their front 7. So they don't need to have just one player leading them. They don't need to have one superstar out there all the time. And Chop Robinson on the flip side took care of that for the Nittany Lions. So there's more time now for Dennis-Sutton to really round into form, get used to the college football level, because we've established one of these defensive ends is going to be has to, at least in every game, be a part of the mix. So week 1, it was Chop Robinson. Week 2, it might be 2 or 3 of them. It's Ohio. Going down to Auburn 3 weeks into the season. Can 2 of them step up and be consistent pressure makers when Penn State is going into zone or all-out pressures? You get one-on-one opportunities. And it's not just about the linebackers who are up against the running backs or the tight ends. Sometimes you get a tight end if you're the edge rusher. Just the way the blocking scheme works. You need to be able to make those guys pay for blocking you with not an offensive lineman. And in those situations, Dani, he only had 7 opportunities. Nothing came of it. This is not to say he's bad. This is a tiny, kind of like Nick Singleton. Tiny stock down. We're not freaking out. We're just pointing these things out because they're building the story of the season. Now, story of the season were those middle linebackers. This was a bit of a struggle against a pass-happy team. It was not a good situation for guys who their skills are more downhill. 3 combined missed tackles between the 2 of them. Gap issues, which we get into in the Penn State film review of the defense. And then Elsdon had some struggles in coverage where he's got to be quicker on the diagnostics and the triggering in coverage. He can't settle into a zone. Brent Pry's scheme, you were able to kind of settle into a zone. It's called a drop zone. This, you got to be a little more active. You got to see guys coming. You got to pick up crossers. And that was a little slow for these guys. Kobe King looked a little bit lost at times. The defensive front, I don't know that it functioned perfectly for the first game, but this is a brand new defense and players are still learning. That middle linebacker position struggled. I hesitate to say they struggled to get people into position because it's such a chaotic system where Manny Diaz explains it simply of we're a 1-gap system. Okay, but what gap is somebody supposed to have? That's the magic of it. And in week 1, I'm still learning the system too. I can't tell you, oh, this guy made a huge mistake here. I can say, well, this isn't right. There are 3 players in this gap. That's incorrect. And is that on the linebackers? Is that on the Mike linebacker for not getting everyone into position? Or is that on a physical error of a guy trying to get from the B gap and he overshoots and goes, 1 gap too far? All those things are going to sort themselves out. But from a run defense perspective, there's a lot of room to improve. And as James Franklin said in his post-game press conference, it's better to do that when you win a game. You get valuable game footage to show the players, here's what happened. We need you to correct this. We've been telling you about this. This is what happens when you don't. And then from that perspective, some of the players that were supposed to make an impact this game and didn't quite get there, all of this rolls into we can just copy and paste for Hakeem Beamon. Pressure from the defensive tackles was not really a thing. There was not any tangible pressure from the defensive tackles coming against Purdue. Part of that is that Purdue did not hold on to the football. Aiden O'Connell held on the ball for 2.29 seconds on average. That is lightning quick. Anything under 2.5 is fast. And that includes all his passes down the field as well. So the edge defenders weren't getting home. That's obvious. But in true passing situations where he held onto the ball, or some of the times where he was, reading it out or scrambling, the defensive tackles in general, and Beamon specifically at that 3 technique, where we were expecting pressure and we were expecting explosive run plays, disruptiveness, didn't quite get there in week 1. Part of that is what we just talked about with the linebackers of learning the system. I think there's still some hesitation from these players, but it's not, I wouldn't say it's terrible at every level, but it's just enough where if you're supposed to be playing on the other side of the football and you're at the line of scrimmage or you're breaking when the running back is getting the line of scrimmage, that allows them to get into gaps you're creating. So this defense is creating a gap to be filled by somebody, whether it's a stunting player or a linebacker, and that linebacker or that other player has to get over there. They have to be in that gap, or else what you've done is you've created a fissure in your run defense. So some of the time Beeman wasn't getting to his positions. Some of the times he was just getting blocked out of the play. So more to come from the defensive tackles. Some good from PJ Mustipher, not so good middle of the road from Hakeem Beeman. And these are important things because Penn State has 6 defensive tackles. Not all of them can play. And this competition is going to continue of who's going to be on the football field at both that 3 technique and at that 1 technique. So Beeman played the majority of the snaps. I didn't see as much as I wanted to or that was needed, I think. And I saved this one for last because I just don't want to do it. I'll admit my biases. I like Curtis Jacobs. We've had him on the show. I think he is an exceptionally intelligent player. I enjoyed talking to him. I thought he struggled a little bit at the will linebacker position on Thursday. And part of it was what we just talked about. He is the player that has to be explosive. He has to be the player that is locked in and confident in playing on the other side of the line of scrimmage. His issues were not physical. He was not being bodied out of holes. He was able to get around blocks. He was hard to block. But the situation was, if you're hard to block 2 yards downfield in this defense, that creates those gaps we're talking about. A couple of times I thought there might have been some mental errors where he's going to the wrong side of the play. But again, I'm learning this defense too. So none of these players, when we say stock down, none of these players are like you have to bench them. This is just here were the issues with the run defense or with the coverage, and this is what they centered around. And with Jacobs, I was expecting explosive on the other side of the line of scrimmage, highlight plays. And there were times where he was caught on the wrong side of the line of scrimmage or on the wrong side of the formation. I think there were times where he was out of his gap. And when that happens, that creates touchdowns, that creates some spill plays to the outside that don't get cleaned up. But again, these are mental things with the defense that is brand new to these guys. And he has the role of being the playmaker. So everything could be set up for him, but he's also got to make sure that he's not running into a play action and voiding his zone. This is very complicated. I think this is a hard defense to do because you have to be right on run plays. Because if it's an RPO or a play action and you're screaming at the line of scrimmage, then all of a sudden there's an open window behind you and there's nothing you can do about it. So I actually don't mind the hesitation, and I wouldn't even call it hesitation. I call it reading. But the process does have to be a little bit quicker, and part of that is learning the defense and being more comfortable with it. And the good news is I think all of that's going to come for these players, for Beeman, for Elsdon, and in a game where they're not playing a team that throws the ball 58 times. I think that's another thing that's going to be helpful for this team is that if they get a couple more cracks at the bat of running plays, the improvement might come there. They only got a couple of opportunities to show what they could do. 1 or 2 missed assignments by each individual player creates, a systematic problem that is hard to sort out. But I think there's good teaching in this and that it'll improve over time. So that'll do it. I always hate ending on a down note, but I don't want to start on a down note either. I don't want to be a bummer here on your Labor Day. So that'll do it today for our Stock Up, Stock Down on the BWI Daily Edition. Make sure you like the video, like I said before. And if you're listening over on the podcast version, thank you. Subscribe, rate, review, all that great stuff. We're growing like bananas here. And I don't know if bananas grow fast, but we're growing like fast-growing bananas. So subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Like the video, subscribe on YouTube. We will be back tomorrow with the BWI Daily Recruiting Show to update you on what's going on with players for the class of 23 and 24 as we get into the official visits during football season, because the home opener, Beaver Stadium, is open on Saturday. We'll talk to you tomorrow.